Good afternoon everybody, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Ollie and today we're going to be running through contract pricing in Prima. If you have any questions or feedback during or after the session, Callum will be on the live chat today, so feel free to ask any questions during the session. Okay, so straight in then. So contract purpose. What is a contract and what does it mean to a Prima customer? So as you can see on screen there, so contracts in Prima allow you to set certain margins and sell prices against your core lines that your client will typically order in larger quantity with a higher frequency. So I say core lines, it's totally dependent on customers. So some customers have contracts worth of 10 items, 50 items, 100 items. So depending on your customer would probably typically drive through what you're putting on their customer's contract. So typically it would be for the larger quantity and higher frequency items that your customer is buying and you're offering a deal on those items. Okay, so contracts are signed at company level, so the Prima company would have their own contract with you on the select lines. However, you are able to manage it in a group scenario through parent and child setup. So as an example, the Prima company have loads of child companies that may have one head branch, one main company rather, or maybe even better, hotels or something like that. I've got the headquarters and then they have the hotels dotted around the country. You can then have your company set up separately for invoicing purposes, but then against the parent company you can control the pricing, which then filters through to the child account. So effectively you're managing one set of pricing from one account. Okay, contract price wins over all prices unless within the featured products you can now have a tick option to say this will override the featured price. It'll be the contract price instead. So if you're doing special offers and you do want your featured price to overrule the contracts, you can do. If not, you're wanting your customer to stick with the contract price, you can also tick an option to make sure that happens as well. Okay, so that's the what is a contract list and the purpose. And then the next section is adding lines onto a contract. So how do I actually get the lines onto my customer's contract? So there's a few ways in which you can do so. So the most popular way I would say is probably via a sales order or quote. So if you're putting an order on for your customer and you're thinking about adding in some lines onto the contract, you can then quickly from the order or quote highlight the lines, add lines to contracts, and then that's updated the customer's contract. Quick and easy, and a quick way of doing so. The other option as well is via the history button in the contract. So I'll go through all these once I've gone off the screen. So in the history and in your contract, you can then view your last order, how much they've bought between the period of May and June. You can view all the information and then make a decision as to whether you're going to add that to your customer's contract as well. And also finally the contract import template. So if you are doing 100 customers for loads of different contracts that you've managed in Excel, you can then put them into the format and drop them into a CSV file and drop that into Prima. So a few different ways of doing so. It totally depends on kind of what scenario may suit best. Okay, so going on to the live screen now. So going through that first option, so going through from a sales order or quote. So I've got a quote open here. So as an example, you've got an outstanding or completed quote. What you can see here is all the items on the quote, and then at the very bottom you've got the option to add lines to contract. So some customers come into the quote for the customer, do all the pricing that they're happy with. So as an example there, you can see straight away margin not great on that one. I'll amend that, go into it, change the information, and then once you're happy with the price, you can then say add lines to contracts. And at this point then you can select or deselect from here what's going to be added to the contract. So as you can see on the right hand side, these two bottom items are already on the customer's contract. So it may be the case that if you are adding those on, it's just going to update what's already in there at the moment. Otherwise we're going to add these three on either at the selling price that we've agreed on the order or by the set margin that we've also got in the order. So looking at that one, you probably won't want the margin because of that minus. You're more than likely going to do the selling price, but obviously you probably wouldn't have a minus margin on there anyway. So yeah, you can use the selling price or the margin markup, which then would insert into the contract directly. Okay, so a quick way of doing it from sales quote and sales order is exactly the same thing. So you've got your list of lines on either or, and then at the bottom you've got the option to add lines to contract as well. Okay, if you are going through a quote and say for example your customers come back to you and said this item on my contract is this, but someone's offering me for a better price. If you are then wanting to update just that purely that one line, you can still do the add lines to contracts once you've done it. Or another quick way of doing so is against the line, you've got a little option here for contracts, and then from the drop down there you can say actually add the reviewed selling price, click that, save it, and then this would then update the selling price onto that contract as well. So quick and easy, manage from the quote or order. Okay, next option then, so via the history button of the contract. So if I just link through to the company and then link through to the contract, okay, so within your customer contract list, this is Ollie Rolls FC, their contract. You can see there's 17 records on it. So in the top right, you've got the option to show the history. So a really effective way of, when you're in your contract, to deciding how to make up the contract, or deciding on what items should and shouldn't go in there. So as an example, I don't want to search on by item. What I'm wanting to search on is for the last order only. So in these options here, you can search on consolidated lines. So if this has been bought 5 times, that will be consolidated onto the one line. By item, as you can see in the grid. Contract sale, so purely what's on contracts and how they're performing so far. Last order only, or just all the contract items regardless of whether they've been on there. So you can also search for a period as well. So if you were doing by item and then looking for between now and the start of the year, you can amend that as you wish. So I'm going to look at last order only and run a search. So I can see these are the items, and these are what the selling prices were on those as well. If I scroll to the right, quite a new field into this area is on contracts. So it basically tells you, is it on a contract? If it says standard, it's on by the selling price, and if it says margin, then it's on by the margin markup option. If it's showing not on contracts, from here then you can make the decision, actually I want those on the contract. I can highlight those and then add them quickly into the contracts as well. So as you can see there, from the history then, that's updated and inserted those contract lines onto there as well. So that's via the history option in the contract. Okay, I'll come back to this screen shortly, but now just going to the contract import. So we can send this across from customer services. So basically you'd have it in this format, so you'd have the account code, item code, invoice description, the pack size, which has to be numeric. So as an example, 1 would be each, 10 pack of 10. And then these 2 options at the end, selling price or markup margin. So it's either or. So if you are doing it at $9.99 versus this one, which we're doing at 30% margin, then it will just be laid out as you can see on screen. Invoice description doesn't matter too much. That can pull through from the product record as well. So you don't need to worry too much about that one. So you put your customer's account code in, format it in the way you want it, so all the items, pack sizes, etc. And then once you're happy with it, save it as a CSV file. So for those of you that don't know, you go to File, Save As, and then from here then you can change your option to be which is the one, comma delimited somewhere, CSV, comma delimited. So that one there, save it in, drop it into your imports folder, and away you go. And that'll be then into Prima as well. Okay, so that's adding lines onto the contract. So either via the quote or order, via the history button in the contract, or via contract import template. Okay, next one then is within your contract. As you can see on screen there, you've got the option here for starting a revision or applying a mini revision. So I'm just going to run through now exactly what those mean to a Prima customer. Okay, so what is a revision? So Prima has various ways to analyse and review contracts. So a revision allows you to evaluate and make changes to the customer's contracts without it actually affecting them until the new contract period, which is up to you and when you decide to apply the revision. So as an example, if I was to open a revision mode, make the changes to the contract, until I've actually applied that revision, the customer wouldn't see those changes. So it's a good way for you can read through this example, but a good way for you to then make the changes while your customer's still ordering the existing contracts and then apply that. So as an example, one customer, they have contract reviews every January at the start of the year. So what they do is in December, they put the contracts into review. They start then messing around with the contracts, look at the kind of quantity, the frequencies, what the prices and the margins are, make a decision on what items are going to stay and what are going to be introduced, and then while they're still doing that, the customer in December is still able to then order the lines that are already on there. Once they hit apply revision in January, the new contract then comes into place. So it's a good way then of basically being able to review your contracts in the background, which your customer can't see, and it's not affecting them buying any items from you as well. Okay, so on to the next one. So why is it important? So reviewing your contracts obviously stops margin erosion, so you're constantly going into your contracts, and if you have got the standard pricing rule, which I've got a lot of in this contract, you've got an agreed set selling price. So if your cost price with your supplier is going up, your margin's then going down with your customer because you've set it a selling price. So quite a lot of customers I'm seeing are reverting to the margin type in the contracts, but obviously some customers like to have a set selling price and like to know what they're getting. So that's why it's important to review it, make sure your margins aren't being affected. If they're going up and down, then kind of working out if it's a good selling price to work off. Okay, and also to be able to remove lines that aren't being bought to avoid littering the contract basically. So as an example here, this customer's now got 20 items on the contract. If they're only buying 5 of those, then when they're going onto the web store to buy the items, and they can see 20 items when realistically they only really need to see 5. So you can use order pads obviously to arrange that, but the contract list, keeping it tidy to what the customer's interested in, will obviously then produce better results as well. Okay, so going back to the screen just to show you how that works. So in here now we've got the contract, you can see all the information, and what I was referring to in terms of the quantity and the frequency, if I scroll across here, you can see that information. So you can see how often they've bought it and over what quantity. So 1 order here for a quantity of 70 versus 4 orders of 1 at a time. Okay, scrolling across you can see other information, so you can see the selling price. If it's a margin markup, you can see that as well. Scrolling through, classifications, if you wanted to sort it by that, you can do. And scrolling across a bit more information about last sale price and so on. So from there, what you can do, if we start revision, this is now putting it into review mode. So your customer, any changes that we make in this revision mode, they won't be able to see until we've actually applied this. So a few things you can do. So you can delete lines from the contract. So you can highlight, delete selected lines, for example, if you're doing it in bulk. Do it one by one using the delete icon or delete selected lines. And you can also export it into Excel if you prefer to work in Excel too. Cancel and revision. So as an example, you've started revision by mistake and you don't actually want to do anything with it. Cancel revision would then put you back into the contract. No changes will save, and you've effectively gone back out of that area. You've also got the option in terms of review dates. So you can see here the last time this customer had a major revision was 16th of June 2017. So if you're making it a yearly thing, so it's bang on time now for us to do another review, we can then say, right, okay, apply a major revision. This would then reset that date and apply the next major review to be in a year's time. Okay, so the difference between a major revision and an interim, if you're reviewing throughout the year and you just want to apply an interim revision, that would keep the frequency and also the quantity. So these here, if I did the interim, these figures would remain. If I'm doing a major revision, so if it is a yearly review, 6-month review that you're doing, then that would then wipe these back down to 0. For the next time you review, you can see what's actually happened since then. So customers that are using the major revision, you can use the analysis reporting or other reports to then view contract spend as well. So once you've wiped out of here, don't worry, history is still kept in Prima. It's just for the contract purpose and how you're managing it as well. So from here, once you've opened revision, and if for example you are doing a big review, you can show history as we went through earlier and add lines and remove lines as you wish. So as an example, this one here, that line's not been purchased in that period, probably doesn't need to be on the contract. I can delete selected lines, apply my revision, and away we go. That item's then removed from the customer's contract. So a good way of being able to manage the contracts in Prima. Okay. Okay, so next step that we're going on to, so the contract grid manager. So rather than individually managing your customer's contracts in Prima, you can do bulk changes across the board. So we don't advise to use this unless you've had training on it. So it is quite powerful in what it can do. So as an example, if you're wanting to apply a set sell price or margin for a specific item across all your customers' contracts, you can then search for KF24001, have a look how many contracts it's on 20, and then from your change tab you can say, right, okay, we'll add this, make sure this is a £5 sell price to absolutely everyone on the contracts. So you can make bulk changes in the grid manager as well. You can also replace discontinued lines with another product, or you can completely remove it as well. So as an example, discontinued products come through from your supplier, which is paper, and you're wanting to swap it then for another paper product. You can do that via the grid manager as well. Also applying a percentage or value increase to certain contract items. So maybe a customer you're not making good margin on, you have a look at the contracts in the grid manager and you want to apply a 5% margin on top of the contract, you can do that in one sweep. So search for the customer's contract. So as an example, Ollie Rolls FC, look at their 20 items on there at the moment, and then apply an increase to that as well. And also you can change the pricing types. So what I was saying there about my contract there was showing a lot of selling price ones. If I wanted to switch it around and say, actually, I don't want to do set selling prices anymore and I want to have it on for a margin, then I can basically go into the grid manager, search for the items, go to the change tab and say switch these from selling price and switch them to margin as well. Okay, so I'll go through those examples now on screen. So in this contracts area, you can then go contracts and then contract grid manager. So just coming back to contracts as well, you can search for all customers' contracts from this contract section of Prima. Otherwise, you do have a quick link from the company record and in that contract button that you've seen earlier. So in the company, you've got that contract button there as well. Okay, so going back to the contract grid manager, so with a little cog icon there, we can go to there and then search on different things. So as an example, if we're looking at one company's contract, you can then search for the customer's name, which is my test account, and then run a search. So from there then you can see the 20 items that are on that customer's contract, or as another example, you can search for particular products. So if I search for that, hit enter or click search, and then the results then are refreshing in the grid. So depending on what you're wanting to change would be what you're searching for in here. You can look by classification, by group, by the price type, by product status if you are looking for discontinued lines as an example. So loads of different things you can do from the grid manager. So as an example for this one now, what I'm going to do is have a look at what the records are that this actually results to. So in the result tab, so search, result and change at the top left, you can then see what the current situation is with this product. So you can see this customer is getting it for $13.74 sell price, this customer is getting it for free, which isn't right. This one's getting it for 50% margin, so you can see all that information within the grid. So on this test database, this is what's going on at the moment. So if I wanted to set a rule across the board to have a selling price of £10 for example on this, what I can then do is go into the change tab, set selling price to, and then put in the figure that you want. So if it was £10, put in your 10, hit apply, and that would update then 17 records that were in that results tab and update those. If you didn't want to update all 17 and you're happy with some of them, you can remove some from the grid. So as an example, I'm happy with that one, I'm happy with that one, and the ones here that I'm going to highlight I'm happy with. If I remove those from this grid, I'm not going to change them then when I go into this change tab. So these ones now, the 11 that are left, will be changed. When I tick that, update this and apply. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier as well, when you are searching for products or for a full contract list, you've got some of the features within this change tab as well. So this is actually what action you're going to make against the contract. So replacing the item with a different product, so you can tick that and say, actually, rather than having the KF24001, I'm going to have another product code. Search for that, click apply, and that will then replace it as well. The change price type, so as I said earlier, so if it's currently set to a selling price on the contract, tick that and apply it, and that would switch it then to a margin type on the contract. Obvious one, remove from contract, so tick that, and that product would then remove off 11 contracts in the system. And then these ones here are the pricing types and what fees you're going to be putting on there. So adjust the selling price by a fixed amount, so put a 50p on top of all the products. Adjust the selling price by a fixed percentage, so put 5% on top. Set the selling price to, so if you're wanting a set sell price for that product for your customers on the contracts across the board, or also set selling price with a certain markup or margin on there as well. Okay, so another option that you could do, so if I search for absolutely every company and every product, that would then take a while to bring back the search depending on how much data you've got. Go to your result, whistle it down. So it may be the case that you're looking at purely the contracts that are currently in review or currently in a contract type, so you can search in those types too. Also in your contract area, if you are doing revisions, if you go into contracts, you can search within here, so for the customer's account code, the company name, a particular code, account manager or business group, and then bringing that down as well. You've also got prospect status, company type and so on as well. So within here, if I run a search for everyone, you can also see what the review dates are, what type of contract they are, and then also all the information in here for the customer's contract too. Okay. So that is everything for today's session. If you do have any questions, myself and Callum will be on the live chat, So yeah, feel free to ask away, and have a great weekend.